Welcome to We Need to Talk About HR and to our first ever live episode. I'm your host, Felix Mitchell. Guys, it's so cool to be here. Seriously, when we started 18 months ago, I didn't, beyond my wildest belief that anyone would listen, let alone join as a guest. And here we are today. We've had thousands of people tuning in, guests from all over the world, and we've just hit this amazing milestone of 100 episodes. So thank you for joining and celebrating today. So if you'll indulge me a little bit, I just want to do a few extra thanks as well. So first of all, thanking my co-CEO at Instant Impact, Rob, who's not here today. He's with his kids, which is fair enough. But it's amazing that he gave me the space and the belief to go and pursue what is essentially a passion project of mine. And I know I'm really lucky in that respect. So Rob, if you're watching, I've heard the cameras over here, thank you. I wanted to thank our incredible producer, Sophie, over here. Absolutely. As well as our editors, Matt and Alan. You guys make us look good. And then, of course, to the guests, the 100 guests who've been on the show. Many of you are in the audience today. Without your amazing insights, none of this would be possible. So what I thought would be, I forgot, I was supposed to do this. Of course, thank you, LinkedIn, for hosting us in this amazing experience center. It's gorgeous. And I'm going to hold up my end of the bargain, which is, guys, there are no scheduled fire alarms today. So if you hear one going off, there's one exit over there, one exit over there. Only one of them leads to safety. No, joking. Both lead to safety. So we're 100 episodes behind us. I thought it'd be interesting to do a bit of an exercise, just thinking about what the world's going to look like in another 100 episodes, in another 18 months, and what our sort of role in that's going to be. I was having breakfast with a friend of mine recently, and he told me a story that really brought this to life. He's right at the beginning of setting up his own new tech company, and he was having a meeting with his leadership team, his 30-year-old head of product and his 45-year-old tech advisor, a sort of grizzled veteran of the unicorn startup world who'd scaled, tech teams 4 or 5 times before. Tech advisor goes, Ben, listen to me. I've done this number of times before. All we need to do to get this product to market, I need 2 million quid, 8 good developers, and I need until the end of the year. And everyone's sort of nodding along because that's what you do when an advisor tells you what to do. But his head of product grabbed him as they were leaving the room and said, Ben, I've just been playing around with this AI tool. Give me a couple of days. 2 days later, they met up for a coffee, and the head of product opened his laptop and showed Ben a fully functioning MVP that he built on his own and said, all I need is 6 months and 1 developer. And this is a story that's playing out in businesses all over the UK, all over the world, in functions like marketing, growth, people, TA. And when you roll that up to the workplace as a whole, it's going to be a monumental shift. In fact, I'd probably go as far as saying we're in an inflection point in human history where the limit of what one person is able to do in one day has shifted radically and incredibly quickly. So for those of us who are in people roles, for those of us in HR, talent acquisition, it gives us a choice. Are we going to sit back and watch this change happen and wait till the dust has settled and then figure out what our role is in this new world? Or are we going to step forward, sort of take our role in shaping this new future? I've spoken to plenty of people in both camps, some in the former, who say, look, the tech's too complex. No one really knows where it's going, so what's the point? The change is too big. Or, you know what, Felix, it's not part of my job description. I want to leave at 5 o'clock, which is perfectly reasonable. But what worries me is what happens if anyone else is stewarding this change. Right, I'm just wondering whether the reference is going to land here. But has anyone watched Pixar's Wall-E? I am going somewhere with this, by the way, I promise. So, well, first of all, it's a fantastic film. So if you're going to do anything this evening to follow on, definitely watch that. But it's really stuck with me. I watched it years ago, and it's one of these films that really stayed with me. I'm not talking about the heartwarming love story between the scruffy but plucky trash compacting robot and his intrepid love interest, Eva, who's sort of flying all over the solar system trying to find new life. It's actually their depiction of humanity in a reality where AI and robots are doing all of the work and all of the production. And they sort of paint this seemingly utopian existence where humans are sort of whizzing everywhere on hovercrafts and drinking pina coladas, watching TV whenever they want. But far from being happy, humans have become directionless, obese, but above all depressed. Without the work, without the purpose that work brings, they've lost their self-identity. And this is something that plays out in the real world as well. The Mental Health Foundation found that unemployed people are 59% more likely to have a serious mental health issue. So in our businesses, as we're rolling out transformation programs, as we're building new operating models, which we absolutely have to do, it's incumbent on us as people leaders to hold the people side, the people impacted by the change, at the front of our minds. And I'm not just talking about friends and colleagues who we've known for years who may be impacted by some of these changes. I'm also talking about the responsibility that we have to build a workforce that we're excited to be a part of in the future. If we leave this change to techies, I promise you they'll automate everything. They'll create that Wall-E world. And if we've learned anything by the last 2 decades of social media, it's that unchecked technological innovation can bring massive societal change in a way that we just don't want. So looking ahead then to the next 18 months, what I'd love to see is people leaders, people in HR, L&D, recruitment, really picking up this gauntlet and being the ones shaping the workplace of the future. Yes, with AI at its core, but with humanity at its heart. How? Way too big for me to answer on my own, and that's why I'm super excited for today. We have a panel full of some of the powerhouses of the HR world, some of the most innovative thinkers I know, and we're lucky enough as well to have Chris Barron from LinkedIn, who's going to come now and give us some of the LinkedIn perspectives. So guys, thanks so much for joining. I hope you enjoy the show.
Great. Hi everyone. Thank you, Felix. And thank you for hosting your session here. And welcome everyone to the LinkedIn Experience Center. My name is Chris Barron. I'm one of the directors here at LinkedIn. And yeah, you're very welcome to be here today. So this space that you're in today opened about 3 months ago, and it's the first ever experience center that we've launched at LinkedIn. And I'll tell you 2 facts about the space. One is these panels here are revolving doors, so they open up the space, and the doors are made and designed by Ferrari, apparently. They're very slow, though. They are quite slow. They move very slowly. The other fact is when you walked into the building, you'll see a lit up blue LinkedIn logo. I don't know if you remember that when you walk past. So this logo flashes 7 times every minute. And that represents people that are hired on the platform every minute at LinkedIn. So we recommend definitely take a picture on your way out by the Inbug. And yeah, you're very welcome here today. So we thought what we would basically share with you, we're thinking, okay, what could we share that would be useful to tee up this panel discussion? And there's a few different areas that we could go. But we thought we would, some of the things that Felix mentioned and that will be spoken about during the panel is around AI, skills, hiring. And I thought we'd just kick off with some insights from LinkedIn around some of these subjects, just to get you in the mood for the discussion today. So what we thought we'd do is share a bit about some exclusive insights on the macro and the impact on the current macroeconomic outlook and the impact that that has on the hiring space, specifically within the UK and globally. And then we thought we'd share some of the trends that we're seeing from LinkedIn, specifically as it relates to skills and artificial intelligence. So I'm going to be sharing a couple of about 6 or 7 minutes of content with you today, and then I'll hand over to Felix and the panel. So for those, I hope everyone's a member on LinkedIn. This is what we call our economic graph, and LinkedIn is now has over 1.3 billion members around the world. And when I joined the company 8 years ago, we were about 200 or 300 million members, and now we're well over a billion members worldwide, and 47 hires are made every single day on the platform, and you can see some of the data. Incidentally, did you know one of the fastest growing demographics on our platform is actually Gen Z? So while LinkedIn is traditionally seen as more of a professional platform, one of the areas that we see the most growth is in the younger audience on the platform, and they're also some of the most engaged audience on the platform as well. You may see that from posting yourself, but this audience is regularly posting, regularly sharing video content, and regularly engaging in the community. So I thought we'd start with maybe big picture. So this data was shared only this week by our chief economist at LinkedIn internally. And this is probably one of the first forums that we're sharing it externally. So I think big picture, the macro environment is expected to be revised down globally. We see reasonably flat growth in the UK and slightly negative growth in the Eurozone. And then we see spots of growth in China and India. And we also, when we look at other factors like business sentiment and wage strength, we see sentiment really confident going into the market, and we also see wages are still very strong as well. Now, one of the things that you will have all experienced living through COVID is the sort of spike as it relates to hiring sort of post-COVID. And we certainly don't expect this phenomenon to happen again, certainly. That's not something that we are expecting. And we see a downward trend in terms of hiring rates on our platform and globally. But what we also see is the number of applications have risen quite dramatically. And one of probably some of the themes that may have discussed on your podcast is this idea of candidate experience. So you've got way too many candidates and way few roles. And some of the real challenges that talent leaders are facing right now is in and around the candidate experience piece, because they're getting so many applications and there are just not enough roles. So we see that certainly in the labour market tightness index, where we have a trend upwards in terms of applicants and a trend downwards in terms of number of roles. So again, this is something I'm sure you will feel in your day jobs, but it's I thought it would be worth sharing some of the data and insights with you around that. Now, we also see this interesting phenomenon of pressure on the younger folks within society, specifically within the UK and other markets in the Eurozone, where we've actually seen the increase in number of companies being formed, and we also see the unemployment rate for age 18 to 24 certainly declining over time, and we certainly do not see that picking up anytime soon. So that's a bit of insight into the macro and the trends we're seeing on the platform as it relates to the labour market and the number of applicants and live roles in the market. Now, what we'd also like to share with you is, I guess, two things. First is professionals entering the workplace today are on pace to hold twice as many jobs over their careers compared to 15 years ago. And 10% of professionals hired today have job titles that didn't even exist in the year 2000. And in the US, it's even higher at 20%. And we also know that by 2030, 70% of the skills used in most jobs will change. And we see AI as a real catalyst for that change. And we see that also on LinkedIn. So we see that professionals have been adding skills onto their LinkedIn profile 140% faster now than ever before. So we really see that inflection point. And again, this is data specifically from LinkedIn. We see every job, so we see a 21% increase in job postings mentioning AI skills, such as ChatGPT and Copilot. We see 140 times increase in LinkedIn members adding AI skills to their profile. And we also see over 70% of companies, certainly more than that, leveraging AI. But similar to what Felix mentioned right at the beginning is around this idea of like soft skills and this idea of AI and machines versus like people and soft skills. And we really see soft skills in our data being some of the most highly demanded skills in society, with communication, customer service, leadership, teamwork, sales, problem solving. The top skill of the moment is adaptability. And these are real human skills. So while we see an emergence of AI, automation, harder skills, we also see that soft skills are incredibly important as we move through this new wave. And then I thought I'd just share this, and we're going to share the slides with you afterwards, but I thought this was if anyone hasn't seen this was just a really interesting plot of artificial intelligence, complementary skills versus replicable skills. And you can see that there are certain job roles where AI is maybe more insulated. They're more insulated around AI versus some that are more disrupted. So you can see here in the bottom right and the top right, these are job roles and skills that are potentially significantly disrupted as a result of AI. So I thought I saw this a few days ago, and I thought it would be interesting to share with the group. So just to wrap up, before I hand over back to Felix and to the panel, a couple of takeaways. So the macro is continuing to be, for the most part, flat. And, we certainly do not expect to see the levels of growth and hiring that we saw post-pandemic. And we also see that change is really the new normal, with people holding more jobs than they've ever held before, and the skills that are needed to do those jobs are changing at a super fast rate. So I hope that was interesting for the group, just to maybe tee off the discussion. We'll be sure to share some of the insights with the group after. And myself and the LinkedIn team are around for the rest of the evening, but I'll hand over to you, Felix. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
If I can usher the amazing panel up here, please, warm round of applause, everyone. Thank you, thank you. So, as I said, we have an absolutely fantastic panel for you today. And we're going to be talking about a really critical topic, which is all around the future shape of business. What's it going to look like in a world of AI, and how do we keep humanity right at the core? So let me introduce the experts we're going to be speaking with today. So we have Claire Hawes, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Cypher. We have Tom Hollis, who is the Chief People Officer of Zappi. Rachel Cox, another Chief People Officer from the Low Carbon Contracts Company.
That's why we use the acronym.
LCCC. Yes. I did it. And Jess Morgan, who's the Chief Transformation Officer at the most innovative talent solutions business in the world, Instant Impact. Thank you so much for joining us today. So let's get started with a bit of a reality check and make sure we're not in our own echo chamber here. So Claire, I've got a question for you to start with. How much power do we actually have as business leaders to impact the way that technology is changing the workforce? Are we just kidding ourselves here?
No, I think with any change, whether it's a piece of technology, a new policy, practice, whatever you're introducing, I think business leaders have a lot more influence and control over that impact than they necessarily realise. And I think if you were to think about AI in a scenario talking about maybe a high-risk work environment like manufacturing, and they've got really, really great health and safety stats, they're not going to have that from just creating a health and safety statement, sticking it on the wall and saying, off you go. That's going to have come through creating a real culture around having high safety, having great practice, and that will have come through education, making sure managers are really empowered. They know how to pick up on poor practices. They know how to engineer two-way feedback. They have an owner at board level. They audit those activities. So I think the control that business leaders have come through really identifying what the AI culture is they want to be introducing to that organisation and building back practices from that point that are going to make sure that's being embedded. So where is the education? Who is responsible for AI? What are the practices you're implementing? How is it being audited? The technology is neutral. It's the people that have the impact over whether that is going to be a positive or a negative outcome. If you think that, we'll just kind of leave it be, actually that negative impact can be so quickly seen. If you're not putting in a permissible use policy, you don't know what information your employees are pumping into some source of OpenAI. You don't know what tools they're using. I think it's paramount that business leaders are taking a very critical look at what is that culture they want to introduce and doing it now. The earlier you're introducing that, the more positive outcome or an outcome that is more aligned to whatever that desire is, you're going to have by kicking it off early and identifying that culture.
It's so interesting. It feels to me, as opposed to some of the other changes that I've seen in my working life, that maybe leaders have been slower to address those sorts of best practice. I wonder what you think is, or any of you here, what do you think is unique about this round of transformation that has meant that many leaders are quite a long way behind the eight ball?
Yeah, I mean, like the obvious answer is I think the pace of change and the rate at which new technologies and tools are becoming available. And I think, the word that you used, which really, I think is forefront here is culture, because you can't take a structured approach to something, a really structured approach to something that changes every 6 months or every 12 months. And actually, I think it is that point of how do you build a culture? What's your tolerance for risk? What's your tolerance for pace of adoption for these things? And then develop a culture, not just a set of systems that will allow you to kind of adopt the tools.
Yeah, my kind of views on that are really similar. So, Accenture did a study recently where, 95% of employees said, they see the value in Gen AI, they see the value in adopting the kind of technologies behind that, but 60% of the same population are nervous about job displacement, and they're worried about it. And unless you can build like the psychological safety, you can get people excited about it, believing that actually they're going to be part of the change, you're never going to move the culture and embrace the kind of the pace of adoption that you need to have with AI because of how much it's moving. So I think people, is the priority, which is why it's so important for us, everybody in this room, to be on board with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to sound ancient now, but I'm old enough to remember having to educate an executive team on why we should really invest in digital. I mean, it was a consumer goods business, so it was a greeting card company. So, and it was, you buy a card in a shop, and, our business is printing cards, and our competitors are other people who print cards. And we had to do a lot of education with the business leaders, this is nearly 20 years ago, about actually the competition isn't just another card company, the competition is, at the time, I think Facebook was new. This is how long ago this references. But I think that showed to me at that time, actually, the fact that the senior leadership team freely admitted, actually, that that was not the business they understood it. That was not the business they'd grown up with, and they had to accept that actually they needed to have people to come in and challenge. And so I think going back to your original question to Claire, it is so dependent on the views of the leaders. And if you have an enthusiastic and embracing leadership, you'll hopefully, and then take your people with you. But equally, I've seen in that example where not being open to change actually, had some really significant impacts because they were kind of like, we just don't understand this.
And leaders being so important for setting culture and, as a result, for setting this response to AI. Do you think that most leaders that you come across in your respective worlds have realized the scale and scope of change that's needed?
I'm a big advocate for, regardless of what your job is, so whether you're in HR, whatever your space, try and spend some time every day, every week, just learning about HR, AI. Go and listen to the DeepMind podcast. Just learn as much as you can about that whole world, because there's so much rooted in the basics around the foundation of the ethics, where there are unconscious bias in the data. If you don't understand the real fundamentals of the basic of how AI has formed, I think it's going to be very hard for you as a business leader to really understand the magnitude and the impact that this could have in the long term. And it is based in technology, so it is going to push people out of their comfort zone of having to learn things that are not their bread and butter. I'm assuming a lot of HR leaders in the room, it's not our comfort space. So really having to lean in and be able to be part of the voice at the table that's educating how paramount it is that we're really having a strong AI strategy as part of making sure we're not left behind in 3 years. And it will be quicker than that. It will be 6 months. It will be a year. It's so fast paced.
It really is nuts. Now, as a veteran podcast host, I know when I need to move on from the topic, because I think we could talk about leadership and AI and culture building for at least the rest of the panel. But let's assume that leaders get on board and companies are ready for this change. Tom, let me come to you just to explore, what do you think the role is that humans and humanity are going to play in businesses in the future?
Yeah, give me the easy one. No. I think the truth is that 18 months ago, the answer to that question will probably be different, and in 18 months, from now, it would be different again. Like any good kind of upstanding member of an AI panel, future of work panel, I asked ChatGPT, and I'll tell you what it said. So ChatGPT told me that humans are going to become the source of meaning, not labor. So we're going to go beyond just like doing the work, and we're going to be about like what's most important, how do we prioritize, and then coordinating the different tools and the technologies, and then ultimately being responsible for the output that they provide as well, right? And it also told me that our job within HR is to move people away from a defensive mindset, where they might be worried about what's being taken away, towards a more exploratory, opportunity-focused mindset. And then I thought, well, it would say that, wouldn't it? Of course. I think I'm a little bit more of a realist. I think that the the amount of knowledge workers that are required is going to diminish. The amount of knowledge work that's required in our organizations is going to diminish a lot. And if you look at industrial revolutions of the past, if you look at history, the pace of change of technology will likely outpace how fast people can reskill. And it will dramatically reshape our organizations. And you see it already now happening. There were lots of organizations, I heard, they would say this, but the CEO of Anthropic that created Claude, he was talking a couple of weeks ago about how in their organization, even a year ago, their bottleneck was engineering. It was getting product out the door. And now their bottleneck is product thinking. They can write code, they can create products so fast that their bottleneck is having the thinking process and the ability to experiment properly with all the stuff that they're doing. So I think it's really, really going to change things. I also think you hear a lot about, there's a narrative about AI is going to become this sort of amazing companion to human expertise and it's going to allow us to scale our expertise. And I know that that's true in lots of instances. It was a really interesting chart that the last speaker put up. But I also think not all of the evidence points to that necessarily being the sort of predominant outcome. And MIT did a study recently where they looked at 350 different work tasks that people do in their organizations. And they looked at what performs better. Is it AI on its own? Is it humans and AI? Or is it humans on its own? And they found, on average, across all of the tasks, that AI outperforms both humans on their own and humans and AI in terms of the quality of the output and the amount of work that it can produce, right? So on average, across all of the tasks that they looked at. What they did find is the stuff that humans are already better at than AI, when you put AI and humans together there, it outperforms that. So there were three things. The first was anything that requires like quite a lot of broad context, so stuff that the AI might not have. The second was anything that requires like interpersonal sensitivity and emotional intelligence and all those sorts of things. And what was the third thing? I didn't write it down. And the other thing was content creation. Because actually, as it turns out, AI is really good at content creation, but when you put humans together with AI, then they outperform. So what I think is there's going to be a big reshaping of our organizations. Those sorts of bits of work are going to be really dialed up. And a lot of the knowledge work that we see now is going to start diminishing. And it's really interesting seeing that graph. I think it's already a tough employment market, and lots of us feel that. And actually, I think this is just going to kind of accelerate some of those trends. As to what our role is in it, I mean, I loved what you were saying, Felix, and I think like we're rapidly getting to a point from what I see that the solutions, so the problems that we have to address for these kinds of technology adoptions, then they're not technology problems. They're really human problems. There are still technology problems, like there's siloed data, and if you have siloed data, you'll have siloed LLMs, and like the actual kind of the benefit won't be fully realized. But like fundamentally, we're moving to a world where these technologies, it's human problems that are preventing us from adopting them. And so we have to do it, and we have to decide, you know, like you're saying, we have to decide, like, do we want to do it? Like, do we want to upskill ourselves? Do we have the capacity and the focus to do that? Because for me, this is the most strategically important thing that HR should be doing right now.
Well, you're not going to get anyone disagreeing with you here, Tom. Or you might do, but not in this seat. But I think what's really interesting then is this world that you're talking about. And who knows how big the shift is from where we are today to what a fully AI-enabled business looks like. But it's going to be, I think we all agree, a lot of change, a lot of messiness, a lot of those difficult human conversations. I was speaking with someone recently, not on the podcast. I do have other conversations, and he was talking about the problem that leaders make quite a lot when it comes to change, which is that you'll have the meeting in your boardroom or in your exco, and you'll say, "This is the change we need to make," and it's like a grief curve. You need to think about it, rail against it a little bit, get on board, change, go through your grieving phase, and then decide to do it and get excited about it and all the positive emotions that happen at the end of it, which is when you tell your company about it and expect them to go on that journey with you and immediately be excited. And I wonder, Jess, because of all of this change, there's a lot of talk around building AI resilience, building those sorts of organizations. So when you look at successful businesses today, what does that look like in practice?
I think I often get kind of questions around, how can we make sure that we're ready for it and we're resilient enough for it? And I sometimes think that's kind of the wrong framing, because to me, that immediately feels like, how do we protect ourselves? How do we make sure that, our roles are still fit for purpose in X, Y, Z years? And kind of to your point, Tom, like the way we should really look at it is how can it not be sort of the notion of human versus AI, but actually human plus AI, and then many variations of that depending on what the activity might be. And then you start to imagine, okay, well, imagine the output of our organisation is significantly greater, but we don't have to scale the workforce at the same rate, okay? Because output doesn't need to equal plus, 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 plus. Then it gets quite interesting, because you go, well, how can we collaborate human plus AI to achieve what we want to get to? And that's quite exciting. The reality of how, though, I think then comes to, it's all back to the people conversation, redesigning the roles and redesigning the organisation to look at capabilities rather than these are the exact roles we need to have. How can 50% be a tech solution and how can 50% be a person solution? Well, actually, no, scale it back. What are the capabilities we need? What can be totally done by AI because actually it performs better on its own and that task doesn't need a human to really intervene, and what is good for a combination of human and AI. And then I think it's a much more interesting conversation. Bringing people on the journey with you to do that is the only way that you're going to make it a successful implementation. Then the other thing that we've seen when we've been working in organizations and rolling out some of the AI solutions that we've adopted is sort of creating the culture of it's okay that we test and learn and that we fail, and it's that there might be products that we try, there might be AI solutions that we test, and it's actually not that good, and actually the human was better at it. Well, that's okay. We've trialed it in a low-risk environment. It doesn't matter. And I think you bring people along the journey with you, and you talk really transparently about it, and then people start to trust into it and buy into it. Josh Burson, I'm sure lots of you have been kind of following some of the stuff that he does, and he talks about the super worker, which is basically individuals across organizations who are kind of enabled to utilize technology and AI to be as productive as they can be, to automate tasks where they can, and to be hyper augmented with technology. But they kind of make the decision based on what they need to do and what they see work and not work. Now, super organizations are the organizations that create the environment for that to happen. So I kind of think tackling it from that angle is probably a better way to look at it.
Now, and I think this sort of, again, feels like a conversation where the reality that we want to get to can be quite far away from the reality and messiness of an organization. So what do we do with those people in our businesses who are blockers? How do we overcome? But we've all experienced them, right? It can be at any level in an org. What do we do when someone's really holding us up?
We talk about FOBO, fear of being obsolete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a lot of it is just about, saying this isn't about getting rid of you. That's not what we want to achieve. What we want to achieve is how can we upskill you to be enabled and confident in using the product, so you don't, using AI so that you're not really fearful that you're just going to have your job cut. The thing that we really like saying is AI plus HI equals the ROI. So AI plus human, human is what's giving you the ROI. And so for me, a lot of it is just through education, real transparency, and making sure people understand what it is you're trying to achieve. Talking less about efficiency gains and more about output improvement, so people don't think efficiency gains means job losses. Just changing your language, really reassuring people that this is about how do we just get them to do more with the tools they've got available, but really leaning into it. People don't want job security as much. They're wanting career security. They're wanting to be educated and taught how to be adaptable and flexible with organizations. And this is just part of that next generation of working. It's just a new set of tools and really breaking it down. Or for me, I'm all about incremental change. For me, everything is how do we just make the next step in the right direction versus a big bang change. So really breaking it down to the basics of what is just the next step? What is the next step to get you more comfortable with the way we want to operate moving forward? And you might not want to be part of that journey long term, and that's okay. But we're going to make every effort to take you on the journey with us, and then let the dice roll as they may. It's just, for me, all about confidence building, education, and removing that FOBO.
Yeah, I love FOBO's my new favourite acronym, but I love it even more than LCCC. But I think one of the naive assumptions I made working with technology teams is that naturally technology people would embrace AI because they're tech people, right? You know, actually it would be people in the HR space who might be like, you know, more resistant. And I think that was, with hindsight, it was a really naive assumption, because actually some of the biggest resistance I saw in a previous organisation was in the software engineering community, for a couple of reasons. Like you said, fear of being obsolete being one, but also just that I've honed my craft for years, and now it's being replaced. And it's a bit like, I compare it a bit like, you know, I did languages at university, and, you know, now I can just use Google Translate. Does that replace, you know, is it dumb down the learning of languages? So I can kind of compare it to that, but I think in a previous organisation I worked in, we had an incredibly pro-AI CEO who just sort of assumed that everyone else was enthusiastic about it as him, which, you know, just didn't land, because, like you said, there was this real fear. So I completely agree. It's that education piece, not assuming that everyone feels the same way about it as as you do. But like you said, helping people understand how actually, do you know what, this is going to free your day up from some of the more mundane things you do to actually do really exciting value-add work. So I always focus on actually this is going to make your job better, not, you know, and free you from some of the stuff actually you don't really want to do.
There's an important tension here, though, right? And I think there is at times we're in danger of leaning too far towards the psychological safety and not telling the story like with enough kind of assertiveness of saying, like, actually, do you know what? Like, we had a conversation with our software engineers. Probably in a couple of years, your job is not going to exist in the way that it exists today. And like, we're going to put all of the stuff in place to help, so, you know, the tools and the frameworks, and you've got a really great, like, you know, InfoSec framework. You know, we're going to support you through that process. We're going to create the psychological safety around the change, but we're not going to create psychological safety around the change of today, but not about the change of the next like 2 to 5 years, because like your job is going to change, like it just will. And I think that it goes, Felix, back to your point of, you know, when you don't have necessarily the leaders who are telling those stories with enough clarity, it's like that's when I think sometimes you can fall down a little bit, because we really need to help people to see what, you know, what's coming.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, just to add to that point, one of the things we've seen is involving people in the journey, and to the point where I mean, hey, we're going to trial this new process in a proof of concept across one client, let's say, low risk. Can you be part of it? Come and help us do it, and tell us what's rubbish about it, tell us what works, tell us what's difficult, and help us refine it to make it good, or to maybe make the decision that it's not right for us or for this client. And where we've done that across the organisation, we've seen real success and adoption, and then those people almost become champions for it and talk to other colleagues in similar positions about the benefit it brings. And then, you know, we'll maybe invite them to an all-hands to talk a little bit about like the benefit they've seen from adopting the technology and how much more output they've been able to achieve. And it sort of becomes its own self-fulfilling kind of prophecy a little bit where it works, because I think there is a lot about leadership talking about it and talking about the benefits and getting on board with it, but people need to be doing the doing with it to see the value of it as well, I think, so involving them helps.
Absolutely. So I think with all of this, and Tom, I think your point around you can't create that psychological safety forever, right? I mean, we've never been able to do that, but less so now than ever before. So Rachel, let me just come to you. For our organizations that are going through a lot of change, let's say we're, I don't know, rolling out new op models or bringing in new technology and putting our future, and well, I mean, they already was, but sort of sharpening the focus on the uncertainty around the midterm, long-term future in our organizations. What can we do to make the team that we need to stay feel valued and secure, even if we can't offer that long-term psychological safety?
Yeah, so there was a speaker last week at the CIPD Festival of Work who said, like, your job probably won't get replaced by AI, but you'll probably be replaced by someone who has basically, engaged with it. So, which I thought was a really interesting way of looking at it. But I think, I think it's really interesting what you say, because it's almost like saying to people, no, you're never going to lose your job. And all HR people know that that's like rule 101. Never say to anyone, don't worry, there won't be any redundancies. It's like, like the absolute kiss of death, isn't it? So I agree that we need to kind of keep that balance right with it. But like you said, it really is just like any other big change program that any other organization does. And making sure that we, to your point, really involve the people in that change and help them see the benefits. Because like you said, you can sit there and espouse, day and night, but actually people need to hear that from their colleagues. They need to see it and feel it for themselves. So I think involving people as much as possible in creating that future. But like you said, you need to give people the tools and then almost like help them, play with it, see what you can do, break it within some guidelines around, I work for a fintech business, but also don't put your customer data in there. There are parameters, but I think it is definitely around involving people, but seeing it as any other change program that you would lead from a people point of view. The fact that this one involves technology, but yes, I totally agree with being balanced about the messaging to people that it's not going to be okay. I always say that to my team that if you're not developing, you're not standing still, you're moving backwards. So in a high performance company, you need to be developing and constantly learning. And then whenever people say to me, well, I don't have a development plan because I'm happy in my role. And I go, well, you might not be changing, but your role is, the world is. So actually, if you're not moving forward, you're actually moving backwards. So I think it's part of that, how we talk about development and learning in organizations as well.
Fantastic. Well, I do need to make sure we're running to time. And I do want to open up to the audience for a couple of questions. Anyone got any burning questions to ask while we give our lovely panelists a round of applause for their fantastic insights? Barry in the front over here. We need the microphone.
Need a microphone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Fantastic. Look, I think it's an observation and I'd love a view on it, but it's the way that we talk about this problem and the way it certainly sounds as being framed in what we know today. Yeah? So we have this as it strikes across. You've still got this, how are we organising for value in organisations? And you guys inadvertently, and we all do it, and we have to put our hands up that I just think there's a big grey area. But you got this AI for intelligence, and it's still the leaders, and they're still pushing. You've got this augmentation AI piece, which might be just your middle managers, get yourself a couple of bots, but you choose. And then you've still got this talk about them and the AI for efficiency, your job will change, etc. Yeah? I kid you not, 27 years ago, the technology arriving for the typing pool, and you won't do this anymore because we have a word processor, it's no bloody different to the conversation we're having today, genuinely. So for me, the frame hasn't changed. How does our organisations add value in a world changing around it? Yeah, so the AI for intelligence should sit close to those, sitting close to the periphery, to the client. Yeah, if you have brilliant AI and it sits in a blinking boardroom, goes nowhere, and your people are lost in the mire of how to serve their client, we'll have learned nothing. So our thinking, the challenge is really, our thinking is, don't think of it as a technology lead. This is the same struggle we've had for decades. How do we organise? Yeah, the digital stuff's just got cleverer, but the value of, are we still waiting for the guys to tell us how to act and how to tell us whether a job will survive? Or actually, we're going to go at this and think, do you know what? This is going to be a completely different way of serving a completely different market.
One thing we haven't talked about today, because obviously we're people, so we're thinking about the people, but actually it's the customer benefit. So I think we've seen a couple of examples where companies have very gone big on AI. So Klarna, who said we're going to reduce our headcount by 700 agents and it's just going to be a chatbot. And then Duolingo went out with a very strong AI first message and got a very big reaction, lots of LinkedIn comments on those posts. So I think in those examples, what they didn't do is explain the benefit to the customer. They just got excited excited about AI and said, yay, efficiencies, but actually from a customer point of view, same as from a people point of view, that's not a particularly compelling message. Like, you know, it's like, for what? And I think Duolingo then backtracked and said, oh, well, it took us 12 years to create 100 courses, and then we've just created that many in the space of a year and a half. But actually the customer benefit was, oh, I get more courses and more content, but I think some of these companies, Lattice did it, they created an AI employee and were like, oh, we're onboarding our first AI employee. Huge backlash from the people community because people said, what's the benefit? What's the problem you're trying to fix there? So I think the companies that have really gone big on AI also need to think, actually, what's the customer benefit that someone's going to receive, in the same way they think, what's the benefit the individual will get from engaging with it?
And we actually also have not touched on compliance, which actually is one of the bigger challenges, I would say, in our scenario anyway, when we're talking to clients about some of the great benefits they could receive from some of the tech that we might deploy with AI in it. Lots of excitement about, you know, the concept of what it could achieve, but then the reality of like, oh, well, hang on, there's this lawsuit going on in America with Workday, we're a bit nervous. The EU AI Act, you know, does it apply to us, does it not, what's coming? That is a resistance barrier as well for clients. So actually we do all the things we like internally, but actually when we start to talk to clients about rolling it out, I think there is this big barrier with compliance as well.
Didn't have compliance issues with the typing pool, did you, Barry? Now, on that note, I think we're going to have to wrap it up. So thank you all so much. Thank you, all of our amazing panelists for today.
And we clap. Clap ourselves.
I've only got time for one more thing, which is a surprise. So we've done 100 episodes. We're going to be rolling up those 100 leadership lessons for HR into a brand new, sparkly book. We're going to be launching it in a couple of months, which we're really excited about. Stay tuned for more. Again, thank you so much for coming. Guests, thank you for joining me. And remember, when in doubt, we need to talk about HR.